Hello, my name is John Reynolds and welcome to Extraordinary Life Stories. On this episode, I'm talking with Charlie Webster. Charlie is an award-winning broadcaster and journalist and a survivor of a near-death battle with malaria, which she contracted after cycling 3,000 miles from London to Rio. From investigative exposés to sports coverage, Charlie's career is underpinned by her resilience and an unwavering commitment to storytelling, bravely and relentlessly campaigning to speak truth to power. Most recently, Charlie's multifaceted resume now includes being an author. I want to know what inspired her to write her new book. Let's get into it. Charlie, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. This is great. Looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. You only just flown in like yesterday, right? So
don't even know where I am. And it's a good excuse, actually, because if I can't string a sentence together, then at least I can say I'm jet lagged.
Absolutely.
I am actually really jet lagged.
Well, thank you for joining me. It's a privilege. Who is Charlie Webster?
You know what? I can't even answer that question straight because I think it's complicated in a good way.
Yeah.
You know, am I my career? Probably very much. That's a big part of me. But I'm a broadcaster. I'm a journalist. I'm a storyteller. You know, I'm a campaigner. And I'm actually just about to release a book, so I'm now an author. But I'm also just a woman from Sheffield, and I've very much got that still a part of me, and that's part
I can
of
feel
my
that. It's super grounded.
roots. And thank you. And somebody that I love people, and that's a big part of me. And very passionate, and a little bit intense, I think. But
that comes with passion, though.
Yeah,
and an interest in people.
Yeah.
Have you always been like that? Tell me about a young Charlie making decisions and having influences that ultimately shaped a career that's so multifaceted. What were those early influences?
Again, that's a hard question to answer because I presume, maybe I shouldn't assume or presume, but people, when they answer that, they talk about, you know, these positive influences around them. I didn't really have that. You know, I had an incredible nana and granddad who I lived with a couple of times on and off in my life who, you know, were a huge influence on me. Like my granddad used to take me walking, you know, when I was only 4 years old, and he'd walk me for like miles and miles. I'm talking like 8 miles as a 4-year-old. And so I did have that positivity inside in terms of that. But, you know, as a child, I was brought up in a very chaotic domestic abuse situation. My mum had me as a teenager, and my mum got kicked out of school, you know, and didn't get an education because she got pregnant with me. So in terms of like, you know, I was the first person to get an education in my family and get a degree. God knows how I ended up in television because, you know, there was absolutely zero influence around me. When I first got into media, I didn't know anybody, you know, and I've got a generational family of minors, you know, so if you ask...
So no role models.
In terms of role models, I mean, you know, sometimes I feel like I had really good negative influences. My mum said to me, you know, I want you to go and have the life that I haven't had. I want you to travel. I want you to, you know, and so, you know, she wasn't somebody that I would aspire in that sense, but my mum really encouraged me in that way. But also that was hard because I love my mum and loved her more than anything. So I didn't see her as somebody that didn't have things, you know. So, but I feel like I wanted to create a life for myself that, you know, I did get to travel. I did get to experience things. You know, it was very unhappy when I was growing up, and I thought, surely there's got to be something else than this. And I probably had a bit of a chip on my shoulder that I felt like, you know, surely I'm deserving of more because I was told constantly that I wasn't. And, you know, surely I can find what happiness would look like. And because my surroundings weren't happy and the people around me weren't.
But there's a lot of... I don't want to say...
It's a complex answer.
Yeah, no idea. But what's interesting is you're super positive, full of positive kind of vibes and purpose sitting here right now. So that childhood that you had, you overrode that somehow. Something in you, other influences and some people from within who overcame all that to then ultimately have the career you've had. What do you think was there that pushed you through?
A drive to have a voice originally. Like I said, probably a little bit of a chip on my shoulder that I was trying to prove something, that I was worth something. You know, it's interesting how you phrase the question, because it's like, what were those influences? What were those positive? You know, there wasn't a lot of them, but again, it was a drive that I wanted to prove that I was enough, and also to create a voice for myself and for people that I felt like maybe didn't get a voice. And then
that's interesting.
That actually, if you look at my career, I don't think I even realized, but that's how it started to all build in. And even what I do now, it comes into everything I do, no matter whether it's to do with like campaigning or my own story and, you know, some really serious stuff, or whether it's, you know, a show I've just done, which was a podcast I made, which was the biggest podcast in the world. And actually, when I got off the plane, I found out I won 2 Webby Awards for, and just now, thank you very much. And even with that, it's somebody else's story, but throughout that, I'm giving people a voice and I'm bringing something to light, which brings justice to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so that becomes a bit of a theme in my career. But all that, I feel like a lot of that comes through this drive of like wanting to create that, because I felt like I never had that.
Yeah, and what I love as well is that the reason why I actually asked the question is there are people that, dare I say, have had, you know, a lot of negative influences, no role models, and have gone down a route that ultimately hasn't been great. They may have gotten themselves out of it, but at the time, and where that's led to, you know, they've spiraled into the victim mindset and potentially gone depressed or what have you. That inner belief that, you know, is so important. It feels like you never lost that, no matter what was happening around you. Even though it might have felt like at the time there was something in you that just said, come on, Charlie.
But I'm not sure it was an inner belief, because I didn't believe in myself and I didn't have very good self-worth, and I've gone through depression a lot in my life. So it's really interesting that that's nice that I give that off. But I don't want to kind of, you know, cut your question, but it's really important that I put that out there, because otherwise that's not honest of myself.
No, I get it.
And, you know, it's really important to me that I am honest. And so, you know, there are things that, you know, I write about this in my book that look like that they're amazing, you know, like this work ethic, this like, you know, that I've got. But some of that was, you know, harmful to myself. You know, it was harmful because at times, you know, I was depressed and suffering a lot from my childhood and things that have happened to me. Yeah. And some of the way that I threw that pain into things was through my work. So
I get it.
Yeah.
But that authenticity, which is just like you are just 100%, you can put it rippling off you, is where you're so relatable. And actually, I guess a word that is getting less and less with the use of social media now, particularly, is empathy. So when you are researching and campaigning and interviewing and talking to people about something where it might be a trauma or, you know, something really tough to deal with, that experience you've had gives you empathy. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah. I mentioned social media because, particularly with sort of bringing AI into the conversation, you know, I use ChatGPT and I'll say, do this, do that. But I've got to that point, having gone through the process saying, please, can you do this? Thank you. This is sort of polite person that's used, because I'm so used to dealing with people like that. Kids are using AI and playing computer games and just interacting on Snapchat now in a way that there's no thought about how someone else is feeling. What are your thoughts on that? Because it feels like that's a society that's coming through now that could be quite dangerous and lacking that all-important empathy.
Oh, God, yeah, that's such a big question because also we, you know, even as adults, like I catch myself doing it as well because I'm doing a million things.
Especially when you're busy.
My phone. Yeah.
Pass me this, do that.
And I'm walking around, even today, like I've had so much on, and, you know, there's times where I have not even looked up. And what am I missing, you know? And I'm so conscious of it myself.
Yeah.
I'm a real, you know, I spoke about this off camera to you. Like I'm a real time person. Yeah. And I think it's because I, you know, again, going back to my childhood, felt that I wasn't given that time and I wasn't given that. Like I'm looking at you and I'm giving you my time. I want you to feel that you're worth something.
Yeah.
And that's really important to me. And that comes with empathy as well.
Yeah.
And,
So respect as well.
Yeah.
I feel that you've given time to talk to me now, and I have your full attention. I can feel it. You're not kind of thinking I've got somewhere to go next. It's a skill.
Yeah, is it? Yeah, that's something that I do, despite the fact that I'm a bit of a fast brain. I'm like, but whenever I'm doing one thing, like I don't think about anything else. I've got like this super hyper focus. But in terms of your question around, social media, I'm really glad that I'm the age of like where I just missed it.
Yeah.
So I started my career without it, and then it came into my career. But I'm so glad that wasn't my childhood, because I think that would have made me feel even worse than I felt. I struggled as a child. I think it would have isolated me more rather than brought me in, because I'm looking at things that I don't have. And
it's the comparable.
Yeah, and this perception. And it's really interesting because I watch my own social media and I'm like, make sure I'm not just posting this like, oh, I'm here and I'm here, because that isn't, it's, what makes me think of, somebody once said to me, but you didn't post about that. And I'm like, because I didn't post about it doesn't mean that I don't have an opinion on it, that I'm not involved in it, that I'm not doing something in my life. Like, I don't just live my life through social media just because something's not in social media. It's that thing where it's like, well, it didn't happen in life, right? So we have to be really careful with our next generation, because you're comparing yourself to something that often isn't even real anyway. But the empathy is so important. I've been working a lot in LA, and I have to say, sorry if you're from LA, but like there is a lack of empathy in that world sometimes, because everybody's trying to like strive and it's a dog eat dog, and at times in my career I've thought, oh God, this isn't right for me. Not because I don't love it, I love it so much, because sometimes I wondered if I'd got too much empathy, because I cared too much about things, I cared too much about people. But actually it's now become my little superpower, because some of the things I've done, like, I'm not sure other people will have been able to, because, I've connected with people. They've trusted me to share their story, and that's really important.
And you mentioned there as well, which kind of goes back to the career side of things, where there's been certain times when you've stopped or said no. At what point have you felt, you wanted to try new things and kind of done the research that's taken you to that point where you mentioned, for example, we're talking off camera with being a journalist with Sky, and then making a decision to do something else. And plenty of people could still be there now doing the same thing.
So I always feel it is an extension of what I do. So I feel like my career is not being I'm going to do a bit of that, I'm going to do that. It's been this. So it's like grown. So yeah, I was at Sky as a presenter, as a journalist in sport, and I worked on Sky Sports News for a long time. I presented Wimbledon, the Olympics, boxing, football, all sorts of things, motorsport, and I absolutely love it so much. Still now it's like a huge passion of mine. But I wanted to grow, and I wanted to, have charge of some of the content,
Sure.
And I want to go down this route because I think this is really important. So, instead of talking about the race, let's say it's Formula One, don't know why that came into my head. I actually think I've noticed something about the driver, because the driver's walking down the pit lane and their head's heavy. And part of what I really love about what I do is I'm watching the race, but I'm also watching what's going on. And that's when you start to read what's really going on behind the scenes. So maybe I want to talk about that, but the team want to just focus on that. So I felt like I want to own and create some of my own narratives and build off of that. And, I want to direct and, my own content. I want to write my own content. So, but it was there even when I was at Sky, but I wanted to keep growing, and I wanted to keep growing my career. And that's basically everything that I've done, rather than it being an about turn.
Yeah.
I've seen it as, okay, right, I've had this great experience here. Now what can I learn? What can I challenge myself with? What can I create next? And that's what I've kind of grown onto, and I hate being pigeonholed.
No,
it's like my pet hate. I'm like, no, but I am also that, and people say, no, I am that. And I'm also that. You know what? I can be both, and you don't have to be just one thing.
No, and you've done so much. I mean, in research I did to be able to talk to you today, the amount of documentaries and campaigning that you've done to then be able to be making programs about things that really matter to you and ultimately make a difference. There are so many things you've done where people, dare I say, haven't been speaking up, potentially through fear. And yet you seem to be a voice, you seem to be a personality that is almost, flipping that narrative where it's like, I'm happy to, not be anonymous. I'm happy to shout about this to the powers that be to expose the truth. When did you almost sort of become brave enough to do that? Because it's one thing being a journalist and a broadcaster, but staying within the sort of the confines of safety, if you like. At some point, something triggered you enough where you were like, I've had enough of this.
I think it wasn't one particular thing. I think it was happening over a period of time where, like, I'd do something for charity, and I'd, maybe run a marathon for charity, and then, but there's a reason why I did it for that charity, but maybe I just didn't fully tell my story. And again, like, the reason why I initially went into this career was because I felt like I didn't have a voice and I wanted to do that. The same reason why it then grew, because when you asked about Sky, like, I left Sky and I knew I was going to the whole year before, because I was like, right, okay, I feel like I've got to this point now where then I can build off of that, because exactly that, I want to do storytelling when it does have that impact and it does make change. But I don't think it wasn't like there was a particular moment. I think it was creeping in from the very beginning, because it was my why of why I even went into the industry in the first place.
No, fair play.
So yeah, I can't think of a moment other than sometimes I'd like peep my toe in talking about something, and then I'd be like, ugh, because I hadn't even come to terms with it myself or spoken out loud.
But when you did, on a number of occasions, but particularly that first time, you got a wave of empathy, if you like, and support from people that hadn't been brave enough to speak. I'm thinking specifically on the abuse from a young athlete.
Yeah.
And then when you put that out there, the outpouring you got, which of course has been a big part of your career ongoing, where the relatability, the fact that you're prepared to do that and shout on behalf of other people, it's powerful.
It is. I can tell you a really quick story. So when the very first time I said out loud publicly on national radio was when I first did it about being sexually abused. I did it, and I went back. I was staying in a hotel because I was in Manchester, and I literally just wanted the hotel to swallow me up. It made me feel so vulnerable. I couldn't sleep, and I was like, oh my God, what have I just done? People are going to think this about me. People are not going to want to work with me. People are going to think I'm damaged. People are going to think like they're not going to want a relationship with me. Honestly, my brain just went closed off, and I felt ashamed.
For speaking the truth.
Yeah, but a lot of it is linked to obviously what happened to me, right? The biggest tool of an abuser is installing shame in a victim, and it's misplaced shame. Absolutely got nothing to be ashamed of, but I'm being honest, that's how I felt. And then I looked at my phone, and I was too scared to look at my phone because I had a boyfriend at the time that I hadn't even told. So I told it on national radio and hadn't told the boyfriend. So I was like, and then I looked at my phone and I was like, I can't even look at my phone. So I gave somebody my phone to look at, and they were like, oh my God, you need to look at this. I got thousands. I have a website that had a contact form. Thousands of it was like going like that. And this was before like the TikTok days, showing my age a little bit. But that wasn't that long ago.
No.
And honestly, it went like that on my phone, and thousands of people. And so, it's interesting, the questions you've asked about, like, what was it? There was all these moments, and that moment, seeing the thousands of messages that were like, I was going to say Me Too, and it was before the Me Too movement, that said, this happened to me, the same thing happened to me, this happened to me, this is how it's made me feel. And I was like, oh my God, that's why I spoke about it in the first place. But, it wasn't like I walked out of there like, yes, I've spoken about that, I'm so brave. Like I wanted literally never to face the world again.
It's slightly terrifying how many people actually came forward, and it shows you how it wasn't just
me back.
Yes, I was going to say
that's the key.
Yeah,
is they inspired me back, because now I was like, this is important. Keep on talking. Keep on saying it out loud, because you know what? I never ever want anybody to feel like I have at times in my life and go through some of the things I've gone through. So if I can change some of that or prevent some of it, then that's my purpose.
Yeah, and I think there's something here where, as someone that through your career would have done a lot of research, a lot of reading, a lot of interviewing and talking to people, you can actually carry a lot of the, it's like almost being a therapist. You've got to then not get everything into you to almost drag you down and take you into a place where it's a heavy weight. You don't have that feeling about you. It feels like you can go through the journey of all the things you researched. And the recent thing for me is malaria. You nearly died.
To
give context,
add that to the CV.
Well, but it's a life-shaping experience
really
that has flipped it into you trying to campaign to eliminate anyone dying from malaria right now. And I think you're campaigning with David Beckham, and that whole thing. You must see and witness some pretty traumatic scenarios there, and yet you're not taking that home with you and actually, kind of dwelling on it. You're out there as a positive force going, right, I'm going to affect change. I'm going to impact anyone that can help the mission. That's a skill. How do you do it, or do you not even think about it? It feels like it's just part of what you do. You just send it.
Yeah, and, probably it's sometimes maybe a way to deal with some other stuff I've been through. So it's like, I did nearly die. For those that don't know, I nearly died. And it was of malaria, amongst other things, but the overpowering thing was malaria, and nobody knew, they hadn't done the test. I ended up in a coma, and while I was on life support, I was in a really bad way. I went through a really long journey, which we don't have time for, off the back of that, because I felt like I didn't recognize myself off the back of that. And it was really very distressing, not just what happened to me, but the aftermath of trying to recover from that. I had to really learn how to walk again. I got PTSD, and it was just really, really hard time. But part of that was, well, I've experienced this. I know what this felt like. What can I do to try and try and do something with it? I think it's like, it was totally awful. There's no shining over it. There's no going, oh, well, I went through that because of that, and that led to that. Honestly, that situation, there is no shining light, and there's no shining light on the fact that I was sexually abused. But if I can, it's not like a learning experience. We say like, you learn through all these horrible things. Let's not shine it. We shouldn't, because it's horrible and it's abhorrent. But then when I nearly died, that was also severely distressing. But it's almost like, well, I can't just accept that happened to me, and that's that.
Right.
What can I do to try and change it? And it's this, like, I can't even tell you where it comes from. It's this like fire inside, where it's like deep inside me. And I remember I had a choice, because I had an idea with Malaria No More to go and make a film in Uganda. And then I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Uganda is one of the most prevalent malaria places in the world. I just nearly died from malaria. Why am I putting myself back into that situation? And I had to sit down and ask my mum how she felt about that, because it wasn't just me. It'd be selfish of me. My mum really was severely traumatized herself after that. She thought she was told that I was going to die. I was given 24 hours to live at that point. And I sat with my mum and I said, I won't do it if you don't want me to. And she was like, no, I know you need to go and do that. And so I went to Uganda, and a year later, and made a film about it, because it's like, that was so bad, so I'm going to make it something good. Yeah. Out of the,
you're all about
the top
reframing
of that. Yeah, like, I just can't accept, well, that was horrible, and that's that, and just ignore it, because I can't ignore it. It's still now, whatever it is, like 7 years ago, it's still it's always going to be part of me. That happened to me, and it was horrible.
And that's just one key kind of experience you've had that you then reframed, as I say, and turned into, how can I help? How can I make sure that no one else goes through this experience, or at least expose it and try and get help? And and so on. And I mentioned David Beckham because there's so many people that you seem to have been able to bring in to the different campaigning that you've done. Do you go after those people? Is that your kind of? Do you know what I mean? Like you
sometimes, but not. I don't want to claim the David Beckham one.
He's just one name, but I know if you research you'll see the amount of people football related, so on.
Sometimes. So when I talking of football, when I did the 250 mile, I ran 250 miles to and from 40 different football clubs. That was me. I was like, and when I first came up with that idea, and a few people were like, "You're never going to get these people involved," and I was like, That's like
the worst thing you say, or the best thing you could say.
That's like basically, if you're gonna say that to me, I'm gonna make it happen. So don't bet against me if you're gonna say that.
Remember that?
Yeah, because that was like made me go, oh really? And football clubs really wanted to be part of it. They wanted to support me, and I got people like Gary Neville involved in that. John Barnes involved, Jamie Carragher. That was me who got all those people involved in the football clubs. The malaria campaign, like David Beckham is an ambassador for Malaria No More. And so, we've actually known each other on and off actually since I was like 21 in the early days of my career in football.
Yep.
And I know he's super passionate about that as well. So that was more of a meeting of minds and passions, but it depends really. But yeah, I'm very driven if I want to do something.
Yeah, I can tell. No, I love it, and it works.
It's making me come across like I'm this like
no, not at all.
Because I feel like, I think it's because also of where I'm from. It's like I have to make things. If I'm going to make something happen, I have to make it happen myself.
No one else is going to do it for you.
No, and I also truly believe that you can make those things happen. I really do believe that, genuinely, because I can't not. Because if I didn't, I would never be where I am. I couldn't accept that start in my life was where my life was. That was my life, right? So if I don't believe that you can create these things, then it's actually really hard.
And you know that now. You've got maturity, perspective, and reflection from.
Why, thank you. I got maturity.
But you do by default.
Thanks.
And that you've done so much. My question is actually based on, I've got 2 teenage daughters, so I want them to be inspired to follow their passion, to be able to make a difference in a positive way in the world. What advice would you give to youngsters starting out on their career, potentially going into journalism, broadcasting, and ultimately following their passion?
I think you hit the nail on the head, actually, not me. You have to be passionate about it because it's hard. I'm not going to sit here and lie. There'll be knockbacks and people that aren't particularly nice, people that maybe don't see you or see that in you. So if it's not what you like, then don't do that. Go and do what you want to do because you really feel it inside. And if you're not quite sure what that is, just think about what makes you light up or what you're good at. Those are those things, because I went into what I did because I felt so, as soon as I started doing it, I absolutely loved it, but I felt so passionate about, nobody could have stopped me. And, there was so many barriers, trust me, in my way. And I've had so many of those knockbacks, so many people that haven't seen me, so many people that maybe, looked at me as a certain way and didn't, and just assumed or
made a judgment.
Yeah, I've had so much of that. Firstly, if you get a load of that, ignore it, because it's somebody's opinion. It doesn't mean it's right. That's probably my most important thing. If somebody knocks you back, don't take that as gospel, because they don't know you, and they might have a certain perception that you don't know, an unconscious bias. They just have an opinion. The next person might have a different opinion and see you. Don't let that be the thing that makes you give up. But you must like it. You must feel passionate about it, and that must be your reason, because then you will absolutely succeed.
Gosh, it's compelling. It's awesome. And actually all these things you've done and are doing, and you're now an author. You've got a book coming out.
I can't even quite believe that.
No, it's great. Tell me what the book's called and what made you write it.
It's called Why It's Okay to Talk About Trauma. And the reason why I wrote it was because I've been doing all these things that we've discussed, the campaigning, I've spoken out, I've worked with lots of different victims and survivors from all walks of life. And during COVID, I also created a mental health group. You know, I was online for hours and hours and hours talking to people who were really, really suffering to the point of, you know, suicidal thoughts. And I just wanted to try and give something and help people because I understand what that feels like. I've been there. I am sometimes feel like that now. I get
Empathy
it.
again.
I thought, how can I then bring it to the next level? Because I'm only one person. I wish I could try and reach everyone. And again, like, I'm not sitting here as this guru who knows everything, but I've been through a lot and I've had to work through a lot. And I've really had to try and understand how to get through these things and my own mental health and my own trauma and how this has impacted my life, because it absolutely does. And so I wrote the book, and I genuinely have written it because I know that what I've written can make a difference and it can help people. And that's why I wrote it. I think it's a little bit unique because it's not a memoir and it's not a self-help. It's a combination of helping and the self-help and understanding how these things affect us and how to work through them, weaved in with my own anecdotes to show how these things affect us. So you can hopefully see yourself in some of the things that I tell in that book and then use the tools and the things that I've used. And it's not things like eat better, go for a walk. You know, to me, they're basic life things that we should all be doing. It's really looking at how the past has impacted us and how traumatic things. It can be anything. It can be a loss, a grief, a divorce, bullying. I talk a bit about sexual abuse in it as well, domestic abuse, relationships, and because they can create these behaviors that we do to try and protect ourselves because we've been hurt. And then we take that into the next thing and the next thing, and we make decisions based on that. And actually that might not be the best thing for us. And sometimes that keeps us isolated in our own pain.
Yeah.
And that's why I really
caught as well, maybe trapped in that vicious cycle. And,
exactly.
And for me, which is a massive why behind why we're talking right now, you learn from people's lived experiences. You've got all of your lived experiences, and then you've got the perspective and the learnings from so many people you've researched and learned from. So that would be an amazing read. I could keep talking to you for so longer, but we run out of time. I feel like I talked
really fast there because I could tell we were running out of time.
No. Everything you've said's been amazing. I could talk to you for longer, but thank you so much, Charlie, for talking to me now.
My pleasure. It's been
awesome.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you.